guys, this is Doug, and you're listening to What's the Hazard? It is Friday, January 20th here in Omaha, Nebraska, and man, I have assembled quite the lineup this morning. I was just thinking on the drive over here as I was dodging the traffic, if Elon Musk could link your brains together for me, we would have like the equivalent of a safety quantum computer in the room today. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. My guest today, from that side to this side, for those of you that can actually see what we're doing here, Jim Steele of Airlight Plastics, Alec Rourke, White Castle Roofing, is it White Castle Roofing? Yep. And Aaron Anderson of the Weitz Company, Weitz Construction, something.
Good enough.
You're corporate, man. I know you're like, so that usually means company rather than construction, because you guys do a lot of stuff. Yep. And you're doing some amazing things. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it, sincerely appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I do want to say thanks to all the sponsors. Their names have been announced at the pre-roll of the show, and sincerely, I appreciate all of your help. We have one patron in place now, or Patreon. I don't know. I think you call the system Patreon, and you call the actual contributors patrons. Is that a true statement? Are you familiar with this?
No idea.
But our good friend Dale Kugler, who everybody knows in the business, Dale Kugler has contributed $1 a month to the well-being of the podcast. So thank you, Dale. $12 a year. I appreciate it, buddy. So I'm not an accountant, and frankly, I took no accounting classes whatsoever. But we're not in the black yet, but we have slowed the red to a trickle. So things are looking good.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Well, guys, what I would really like to talk about, at least to start the conversation, is 2022. I had my buddy Aaron Cerrone in a few weeks ago, and he asked the question, how do you define success when you look back on a year? What is our definition of success? And without revealing anything that is certainly, private to your companies, how did 2022 go? And how do you evaluate, when you look back on the year, how do you evaluate your program? Anybody want to start?
I still have a job.
Okay, yeah, right. Sometimes, in our world, that is a success to some degree, but
I could throw something out there.
Yeah, get us started,
so
Jim.
we have a KPIs, key performance indicators for safety, and for each of our plants, we have plants around the country, and for each of them, we set up independent key performance indicators for safety based on what they really kind of want to do. And we measure their results throughout every month. They report in on, how many inspections were done, how many safety improvements were tracked to closure, how many, safety committee meetings they had, things like that, SMART goals. And so we measure those, and every month they report in on them. And so we kind of know how they're doing for those leading indicators. And then at the end of the year, we compare that to the lagging indicator of safety. How well did these key performance indicators affect that lagging indicator? And the presumption is there's a connection. So the better we do here, the lower that'll be. And
have you seen that to be the case? Is that
no.
Is there some correlation?
Actually,
that's a really interesting question, though.
It's really hard to make the connection because it's so dubious. I mean, is that the right word? Dubious?
Yeah, vague.
It's vague. Yeah, it doesn't quite. So you just kind of tweak and adjust. And at some of our plants, I think there's seems to be a direct correlation. They do really well on the leading indicators, and their lagging indicators weighed low. We have another plant that nailed the leading indicators, and their lagging indicators were way high. And so what we do in that case is.
And do they have different key indicators? They establish their own key indicators. Right. So is there a way for you then to say, well, these tend to be, there's a stronger correlation to the outcome?
Right. Yeah, we do that. But they ultimately have to decide because they're independently managed. They're autonomous. Each plant's autonomous, so they get to make their own decisions. But yeah, they're open to, well, here's what these plants are doing. We have meetings like that. We'll pull other plants together to talk about what they're doing and what their key performance indicators are and how they work. We do it in Zoom, and we do Teams, actually. So we can all meet up and talk about the successes at one plant, and they can mirror those to the extent that they fit into their scheme of things. So so that's kind of how we measure it. We ended the year, the one plant that they don't seem to be a real connection. They did really well on the leading indicators, and their lagging indicators had a lot of injuries, more than we wanted. Well, we didn't want any, actually. But anyway, yeah. So I'm planning to spend a couple of weeks out there the first part of this year, and we're going to just restructure everything and try to figure out a better plan. And we've identified some real problems that with the current plan, and we'll reestablish that plan and see. Hopefully next year we'll have a better result.
Interesting.
I
What about you guys?
We're still looking for what are the right leading indicators to measure. We've measured inspections done and behavior-based safety % complete and all those sorts of things. And, I think that's always something you're searching for, and what new technology helps drive that. So, when we look at 2022, the few things that we look at every year, each safety committee in each of our locations around the country has their operating plan and their goals. And so we're going to look and make sure that they've accomplished those. And then again, is there a correlation to the performance? I think for us, when I started with Weitz in 2006, a good year was a recordable rate of like a 2.2 for our self-performed work, which was awful. You're hurting 30 plus people a year. It's just ridiculous. And so as time has gone on, our focus was really on that self-performed work side of things, and there's pre-qual issues and everything else if you don't get it low enough. And so we were really inwardly looking, which is, it's not like we ignored our subcontractors as a general contractor, but, if a sub cut his finger, it didn't hit us as hard as if our own employee did. And as time has gone on, we've really driven that down to the point where, our self-performed, I think our recordable rate is like a 0.7. We had on 2.5 million hours worked, no lost times, and like 5 recordables or whatever this year with our self-performed work. We're hurting a lot of subcontractors. And you go through, our subcontractor rate was like a 0.8. So it's still really low, but there's still lost times in there. And so one of the things, and this kind of gets into what changes in 2023. So, one of our offices is at 4 million hours without a lost time for the self-performed work. But if you look at their subcontractor numbers, you just go, what in the world are you guys doing? And so we won't ever again share separate numbers. So when I share with that office in the future, it's going to be, here's your rate. Subcontractors, they're people on our job sites, and you shouldn't look at them any differently. So that's a little bit of a cultural shift. The other big thing for us this year, and we took this directly from a client, is we are probably putting most of our focus from a lagging indicator standpoint on worst potential severity. So if you think back in the construction world, how often do you have something happen that you just got lucky and no one got hurt? An equipment overturned, or you hit a utility while you're digging, or whatever else that might be, that but for luck, someone could have been
potentially serious consequences.
And so we've started to track our worst potential severity, subcontractors, et cetera, and putting that into a rate, because I can think of all the years you go back. It's like, look at our recordable rate. It's a 0.8 and no lost times. And aren't we successful? And then you think back through the year, but we hit a power line and we flipped over that piece of equipment, and that one subcontractor fell 8 feet. You go through all these things that could have been disastrous, and they just kind of get forgotten about as you go through. And those are really the most important thing. Somebody cuts a finger and gets a couple stitches, our expectation is that doesn't happen. But boy, if you can drive to the big stuff, and they're all preventable, and that's probably the part that's the most frustrating when you look back on it. But that's, what did we measure this year? Well, I look at our worst potential severity rate, and that one is the one that we're really driving at.
And how do you make that differentiation that this falls into that category? Is that something that you do as a group, or you just have some basic criteria? It was related to a fall.
We have some basic criteria of, if a fall, anything electrically related. Obviously, anything with equipment, an equipment overturn or something along those lines are going to hit that worst potential severity. But when we have an incident, and kind of one of the other changes this year is just kind of how we react to those. So if we have an incident that happens, say in Denver, within half an hour, we want a text message to our CEO, COO, myself, et cetera, that everyone knows what's happening. Even if it's first aid, somebody cut their finger, it goes up to that level. Within 24 hours, we have our root cause call with the project team, our COO, our CEO, the local management, to go through that. And at that point is when you make that determination, is this a worst potential severity?
This is kind of like the Paul O'Neill model, because Paul O'Neill, the old Alcoa CEO, did the same thing. I want to know within 24 hours what happened and what you've done to correct it. I love that.
Our senior management's extremely engaged. And
they are.
That does obviously drive performance.
That's
we're very fortunate to have that.
That's interesting. What about you, Alex? Because you guys are all from different worlds, which is why I kind of assembled the group the way I did. General industry, large GC, huge projects, subcontractor, more regional, local activities.
I mean, for us, I look at we didn't do as much leading indicators because we're kind of building into that. I started getting all of our superintendents to do daily site inspections, that kind of thing, and tracking which crews are having the worst compliance. I mean, keeping it really basic. Like, are you following the site safety plan? What fall protection? Because we're roofing. The biggest thing for us is fall protection. Which fall protection plan are you following? And is the crew being compliant? And I can judge and see, like, there's one of our residential crews that only hits maybe 50% compliance. So I can identify that crew to go work more with them and sit on top of them and make sure they're playing the game. And then looking a lot at our lagging indicators, I came in almost 3 years ago to White Castle with I would say a decent injury problem. And we closed 22 out with 4 recordable injuries, over 500 days without a lost time injury.
Good for you, man.
And one of the injuries was somebody got a corneal abrasion, so something in their eye, which is almost
unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's almost.
I mean, he had safety glasses on. He was cutting some fascia with a circular saw, got some sawdust in there. He did everything right, flushed it out, that kind of thing. There's, like, without wearing sealed goggles. I mean, even an office person can get something in their eye and scratch their eye. So I was able to break down and get the big spreadsheet out, look at all our injuries, what time of day everything occurred. Our average time of day was 10:40 in the morning. Average length of employment was 15 months for an injury. Average age was like 43, which was older than the year before. So it's trying to then take the data from last year and build it into this year and see where we can identify, like, why did all our injuries occur at 10:40 in the morning versus later in the day the year before, and working with each crew specifically. Our other big thing is, well, we didn't have a lot of injuries. We had a lot of vehicle accidents last year. A couple of them were, yes, our fault. One of them, which was kind of one of those, it could have been catastrophic. We had one of our Dodge flatbeds roll on the interstate going 75 miles an hour after the rear wheels snapped off. Travis was able to walk away.
Wow.
Not a scratch. I mean, he rolled a 12,000 pound truck, no scratch. We only lost a couple pieces of product. Everything stayed secure to the truck.
Wow.
Nobody else was injured. I mean, I raced out to out to York and found he was just standing in the median, like, all right, let's go home. So,
Holy cow.
But that's, like you said, I report directly to the COO. So Jake knows immediately when things go on. CEO Dane sits, my desk is right in front of his office. So everything that happens, they know immediately. So we can make those changes on the fly and discuss them and see where the cause is.
Tell me again, what's the term you're using to describe these critical?
Like a worst potential severity.
Worst potential severity.
It's
so you
very
calculate
similar,
that separately.
Yeah, or SIF,
Sure, a SIF, absolutely.
Right, but yes, we have a separate rate for worst potential severity incidents. And we break that down by office and et cetera.
Interesting. Yeah. I find that really interesting because as I've kind of been reading and evolving in my perception of how this is supposed to be happening, there's a lot of emphasis placed on that. And as a former OSHA guy, no disrespect intended, I'm going to say, we spend a lot of time focusing and worrying about trivial shit that really doesn't matter, and that emphasis has forced the hand of so many employers and contractors to also focus on those things. And we lose those SIF issues, just like you said, Aaron. If there wasn't a bad outcome, we almost just like, whoo,
yeah,
and forget about it, right. And that's really terrifying. And
it's something we've been guilty of
everyone
for a very long time.
And it's not I think we've been kind of forced in that direction to some extent. Did you check the fire extinguishers this month? Who checked the fire extinguisher? I mean, this is the one I've kind of focused on recently, but I see a lot of time and effort put into checking the fire extinguisher, make sure that little arrow is in the green, and then writing your initials on it and walking right by,
We even went to the point back in June or July where we used to have, every superintendent will do a weekly documented inspection and it was all check the fire extinguishers, we just stopped that. We said, obviously you still need to inspect your jobs. They're out there every day. They're capturing their observations on Procore and on their daily log. So I have no worries as far as, like, from an OSHA inspection. Are you doing your inspections? That's happening. But we said, stop checking boxes on that. Go out. And we want all of you, when the subcontractors are doing their JSAs, we want you out there reviewing them. We want you going out and checking them, and put up the posters of, if there's one critical thing is, you call them high risk activities of anything with electrical trenching, fall protection equipment. We want those identified on a 2-week look ahead, on the 1 week look ahead, talked about during the weekly subcontractor meetings, identified every day of what's happening today. That's a high risk activity. Is the JSA in place? Do they have the right plan? Have you reviewed it? That put your time there. That is what's going to stop someone from being seriously injured or killed on our jobs, not checking the fire extinguishers.
I
We'll
totally
still get out and
agree.
do that.
Yeah, it needs to be done.
Those are important.
I'm not suggesting ignore that,
but it's not where you focus your time.
And your whole life is high risk activities. Your guys are always in high risk activities, driving and on a roof.
That's the thing, is the two leading causes of fatal work injuries are driving and falls. And I mean, we drive company-wide on average 50,000 miles a month during the peak season. And now we're the whole region. And that's always my big fear, is getting that call. Like, I always have the GPS pulled up on my phone and watch the trucks, especially I get home in the night. I'm like, I want to make sure everybody gets home. Like when the snow started the other day, I was the last person to leave the office because we had one truck that was coming back from Omaha. I wanted to make sure he came back. But it's focusing on those. And one of the things that I read it recently, that it looked at companies with lower DART rates and lower injury rates could often have these higher SIF incidences.
Yes.
And trying to find the correlation between why that happens. And so, like, now that I've brought our DART rate down to 50% of roofing average, I'm like, what? Like, it's not an if, but a when. And that's the unfortunate truth in roofing. I mean, we have 200 guys in the field during the summer, and some of our jobs this summer, we're looking at roofs over 100 feet tall. And that's one of my, like,
the Jim's neighborhood, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing a bunch of stuff on campus in Lincoln, and then some in Omaha. That's my fear, is those taller stuff. Even though 20% of fatal falls are under 10 feet, you still think about those tall roofs.
The tall roofs don't scare me as much.
People tend to be a little bit more attentive.
Yeah, people see the
pay more attention.
Deeper trenches. I have less issues with than 7 foot deep trenches.
Right.
Yeah, tall roofs.
And are they traditional? Are these flat roofs or low slope type things?
Most of them, all the low slope ones are the tall ones. Although, I mean, we have been doing a lot of apartment buildings lately. So you're talking 40 feet. You got all your steep slope guys on a 40-foot roof. The one I did have this summer when I went out to check a job down in Beatrice, and I was really hammering my guys on Beatrice because OSHA was hammering Beatrice on storm con emphasis.
Right.
So I went down to pull up on a crew. It was a little single-story old farmhouse. The whole crew was sitting up on the peak. None of them had the ropes on. And as I pulled up and parked, I got out and I walked. And as I walked around the side of the house, they were all on the ground picking up trash. I walked back around to the front of the house, and I walked to the other side of the house. The ladder was on the front of the house. My whole crew jumped off the roof because they knew I caught them without fall protection. And I was like, I was like, there is no way you got
I see the ladder. The ladder's right in front of me, man.
And I was just like, what are we doing? Like, it's one thing, like, you guys already know you're caught. Trying to play this off, I was like, that could have gone a million bad ways. Like, it's like, we're not doing that. I mean, that's
and look, man, I'm not here to beat you up about this stuff. We need to figure out why this is so difficult. I mean, when you had mentioned earlier that the different crews have different rates of compliance, there are a lot of things that go into that, and that interests me because I think, the work is different every day, and so and the nature of the roofing work might drive someone to believe that fall protection isn't very useful here, or at least isn't very easy under these circumstances. There's a lot that goes into that, the context of it. That's really challenging.
I met with our superintendent recently, one of our head superintendents, and be like, what type of harness would make them want to, like, if we're going to get a nicer harness with more padding with the waist belt, would that get them to wear the rope and harness more often? I mean, they know they all request more on steeper roofs. They can use it for positioning, but that's the problem I get a lot of times is they'll have the rope, they'll have the harness to be up on the roof, but they're not connected. What can I do so that you will be compliant? What can I do to make it easier for you?
It's interesting too. I mean, just specifically to roofing, I can think of multiple roofing contractors that we don't take bids from anymore because of their safety, whether it's, too many serious safety violations, or like, we're just not doing that anymore. It's a really unique opportunity you have too, as far as if you could set yourself apart as the safest roofer from a business perspective, the opportunities that open up to you would just be astounding. People would pay more for, especially larger GCs on bigger projects.
That was more for that. Our big thing is our mod rate went way high last year because we had a couple of years of really bad injuries before I started. And then I started halfway through 2020 and had 20 injuries that year, including one fall. And I found like getting our mod rate down to about a 1.0 for this year was a big thing, because the same thing is we couldn't bid those contracts. And I was telling the guys the year before in 2021, like, here's the deal. It's not just getting hurt that affects you. It's if we continue to have these injuries, our insurance company will have trouble, and then we won't get jobs. We will not be able to bid these jobs. And if we don't bid jobs, you don't have jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a roofer I can think of that we quit using due to, a recordable rate, but their ability to tie off with 100% certainty. Yeah. That's the focus. And if we can't find someone that does that, then we're just not going to bother with it anymore.
Right. It's pain to have in there. Yeah.
What do have you guys identified like those critical activities? I mean, do you focus on those things too? These that we consider really dangerous?
We do. Well, we have machine guarding for us, and lockout tagout is kind of top of the game for us. There's fall protection issues that come up when you have to crawl around on top of the machines. And our safety manager, Abby Cheerney, Abby, set up we had a pretty good fall protection plan, but we had compliance issues that people just didn't want to do it. And one of the things she did was allowed them to pick their own fall protection equipment. And so they all huddled up and figured out which one do we want. And she went out and purchased the ones that those guys wanted and that they thought they would wear, just to remove that as an excuse. Well, it doesn't fit. It chafes me here,
Right.
That kind of stuff. And
it clashes with my eyes.
Right. Exactly. So she removed those reasons for not using it.
Yeah.
But we track, we have what's called a safety improvement status tracking process. It's just a process for tracking things all the way through to correction, which works well in general industry. For construction, it's got to be fixed now or it all changes by the time you come back. But in our industry, it'll stay there and it'll keep recurring until you track it through to correction. And so we do that. And then we have a gravity of the hazard indication on there. There's a high gravity. Was it high, greater, high, lesser? It's kind of like OSHA.
Similar to the OSHA.
Yeah, it's modeled on the OSHA
risk assessment codes.
Assessment, right. And so they're all lined up according to that. So you can pull those up. They also have target dates, which is what's next and by when. So it's not when is it going to be completely done, because sometimes it's such a big project. People go, well, I'll never be able to get that done. But you can take the next step towards completion.
Right.
And you get people to focus in on that little step. And then before they know it, they've taken 10 little steps and they've finished. Right. So we track things that way. I'm not sure if that gets to your question, but those things are lined up. And so when we're looking at our monthly safety meetings at the things that are still outstanding, if something's fallen behind on that target date and it's a high gravity, those are the ones that we tend to pull our attention to.
So one of the things that I have always hoped that this would become was an opportunity for listeners to send questions or comments or even make suggestions, things that they've tried that have been useful. And I got a question last week, and I think I actually let you guys know this before we assembled, that Mike with, I won't say the company, I guess that's not irrelevant, but he was asking about how we handle non-routine tasks. Okay, which is an interesting question. OSHA, of course, has described non-routine tasks in the hazard communication standard. You have to have a way to address non-routine tasks. I think they're specifically referring to any type of chemical tasks when when you're using something that you're unfamiliar with, perhaps, but it applies to everything. And I think there has been some data that suggests that non-routine tasks tend to have different consequences, or at least different rates than our routine activities. I don't know if that's, I'm not quoting from a study or anything, but you and I have talked about this many times. Do you do things specifically for non-routine tasks, or is it driven by that severity issue, or both?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like when I think of non-routine tasks, and just kind of, I'm guessing your chemicals stay pretty consistent, there in roofing. In the construction world, chemicals isn't usually the big issue, right? Every now and then there's something unique, an epoxy or something, and you go through and that you plan for, you review the safety data sheet. If there's a strange respirator question, I'll call you because I trust myself with it.
Right.
But for us, the non-routine tasks are rework and warranty work.
Okay.
So, we had, so you start thinking about, we had a roofer come out in March. The big crew comes out, they do great. And now they come back to do some warranty work in July, and they send their warranty people who probably are on 5 roofs a day. And so your crew in March does a great job tying off. The warranty people come back in July, and who knows? And so it's that, and rework is always a struggle. People hate doing stuff for the second time, and they want to go fast. And so for us, we still expect all the JSAs and everything to be in place, but I also get worried about warranty work when the project has reached completion, but somebody has to go back And so we did put together a warranty rework, just a checklist of if you have this stuff happening, do you still have the competent person in place? Is the plan still, do they still have everything that they had? And, specific to roofing, we made some changes after fall this year. We expect all of our roofs to be secure. So if you have a stair tower, we want a gate on it and a padlock and signs and everything else. The warning line, it's terrible when the roofer takes their warning line, but there's still 5 other trades that have to get up on that roof to the end. Buy that thing out. Either put up our own and tell the roofer to exclude it, or hey, roofer, we'll pay X amount, leave those things up there for 3 months and come back for them later. Some of the, we make sure you have a permanent anchor point. So trying to plan for those things and just identifying them is a big part of it. So that for us with the non-routine tasks, that's probably the biggest. Is some warranties and rework type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking down the line.
I wonder if too, it just occurs to me is that people that would not do it right the first time because they didn't have time to do it right the first time, so now they got to come up with time to do it right the second time. And that type of work ethic is what leads to injuries anyway.
And with a lot of smaller subs, especially. So we do large projects, but we also do small. We have special project groups, so we kind of do stuff of all sizes. And a lot of the time with the subcontractor, they have a different crew to come back and address those warranty things than they do for the production. And so you have all this training and, people, we have a lot of times too, where you worry, where did they work at before? You have a roofing crew come out. Sorry, you're just sitting here. So I pick up
more easy to pick on.
You have the roofing crew that you put all the time in before and made sure they had a competent person, and they show up and they didn't have fall protection. So you stand them down until all the stuff. And then who knows who comes back 2 months later to do the,
well, oftentimes we do know who that person is in different companies. It becomes that person for a reason, either an expertise or an inability to do something, whatever that is. I've seen that in my world before as well.
And making sure you have enough staff. We one of the terms we use a lot over the last year is just span of control of how do you make sure we have enough of our staff, enough safety managers, enough competent people securing job sites, having cameras up that you feel like you have your arms around that entire job site and there aren't things happening in the corners that you're not aware of. And we haven't solved that yet. And that's on this year's operating plan is really setting, here's the standard for, do you have to have a gate to go in? The larger jobs are going to have a gate and you have a pass and you know exactly who's on site. Well, it's hard to do on a, smaller school remodel type of scenario. So
interesting.
It's one of there's a couple technologies we're looking at with that too.
Interesting. And I love that phrase you used, what's going on in the corners, out of the line of sight to some degree, either monitoring or visual or whatever, or just, unsupervised. Like you said, the rework and stuff like that.
We've pushed that every job site has to have cameras moving forward. So we had one of our projects in Denver and on their own put a really good camera system in. And they had a scaffold frame fall from like the 4th floor.
Ooh.
And it was captured on video, and it was actually ended up being a success because they had put a ton of effort into barricading the areas below. This was a forming system. It's right on the edge there's no way to control it other than by hand. And so they had everything barricaded below. The doorways were blocked off. They had a full-time spotter just watching to keep people out of that area. So as you captured on video, you also see that it landed in a spot that
was designed for that.
Right. They had taken that into account and stuff, but it's one of those where we said, man, you could write this up 100 ways and people can read it and go, but we sent the video. And so when that goes out to the company, they look at that and go, oh, that's something I should be replicating.
Right. That's terrific, man.
Really, really good.
That's terrific.
We're not there yet, but that's the push to have those out there.
All of the stuff that I've been reading talks about failing as safely as possible. When we do have errors that are inevitable, that we have a soft landing. And what you've just described, I heard Conklin, he told a similar story to that, was more picking and moving with the crane, but a rigging failed and the load dropped into that designated area where no one was permitted to be, and it worked. And so I'm not sure we consider that a failure. Actually, this might be a success that you really trumpet, it worked, and this is why. So that's interesting. Now, what about, you're kind of talking about more cameras, more visibility. Are you looking at any new technologies? You use a lot of interesting technology. Anything new for 2023 that you're considering implementing or trying, or you're always,
I got a few things, but
you're always tampering and trying new things. I love that.
We started using in late 22 was an app called Fall Safety Pro, one of my biggest fears isn't the big projects, is we've developed a large service team, service group. So we have guys out solo all over, and now in Colorado and South Dakota, and they travel as far as North Dakota, Illinois, that kind of thing. And they're out by themselves. And I think, what if they fall and something happens? I mean, a lot of the time they're going up and they're doing an inspection. We have a service contract. We have to go out and do all these inspections. So they're not going to be tied off doing an inspection on a large church, but you still have that potential for falls. So with the Fall Safety Pro, it's just an app on your phone that detects a fall. So you can set up check-ins and that kind of thing. But the primary thing I got it for was it detects the fall. So if it detects a fall, it'll immediately notify me. So-and-so has fallen. Then it starts a timer on their phone that I can set anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, that if they don't hit I'm okay in 30 seconds, it notifies me again with their GPS location, and I can call for emergency services. I can also set up to have monitoring where they will automatically call emergency services, as well as their phone starts playing a loud siren. And trying to get that, because that's just my biggest thing that keeps me up, is I got these guys out all over. Like, I know how to handle it around here, but if they're in rural Nebraska or some other place.
And that's called Fall Safety Pro. And it's just an app that you've purchased?
The app itself is free, but I think we pay like $10 or $15 per month per user that actually uses it. But
so there's a lot of applications for that. The lone worker applications.
The lone worker applications, they have a few lone worker ones, and you can press SOS on your phone. I can set designated check-ins so that they have to check in at the job site and at certain periods.
Like an alarm will go off and they have to touch it.
Yep.
I love that, man.
And the best was, there was one day I just tossed my phone in the, because it's on my phone. So I tossed my phone in the passenger seat. And I'm like, what is that siren going off? And I look down at my phone. It's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. But it
works.
It does work. Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah. But it's making sure the guys have it. So we're still kind of playing with it, the best way to use it. But that's trying to get them, because we use Company Cam that was developed in partnership with White Castle, so that they're taking pictures. So I know as soon as they get to a job site, but they could be at a job site for how long. In fact, it was last year, maybe late 2021, he's been with White Castle for 20 years. His brother works for another roofing company. And as a sales guy, he went to step off the roof to get on his ladder and missed a step and fell 15 feet on his head and was airlifted. And it's one of those things, like that routine thing, just getting onto a ladder and that simple thing. And one of the things that saved him is for whatever reason that day, he had somebody with him. He was at a house in Ashland that nobody else was around.
Which was unusual.
Yeah. And if he hadn't been with somebody that day, he wouldn't have made it. He was airlifted to Omaha, and he had a traumatic brain injury, and he's doing fine now.
Good.
But if he had not had somebody with him that day, that would have been it. And
that app would have
at least
worked under those circumstances. You would have been aware, and you could have mobilized some services.
You guys use any drones or anything to inspect rather than sending up a person?
We've experimented more with it. The problem is you got to get FAA license to do it, which isn't hard. It's just getting somebody to take the test and go through the FAA training, because if you use it for commercial use, and I know there are other roofing companies that are, and we have a couple people that can, and we use it a lot for marketing. In which case, when they call me, hey, we're going to go fly a drone, I have to go to that job site and make sure everything is kosher, because I'm not putting anything out of marketing that's for guys wearing ropes.
Thank you. But it used to make me call companies when she would see advertisements that showed something that was non-compliant. I want you to call them. I was like, and do what? Tell them not to do that.
Yeah.
It was an actor.
But it's one of those things, like, a drone, like, to get people off the roof, you can do a great evaluation from a drone. There are some things you will miss, but for a lot of stuff, you could do a lot with a drone, even just kind of a progress pics, early inspection, basically, like, go to a house that might have hail damage. You can see hail damage with a drone. So.
And the system you just, what did you call the camera?
Company Cam.
So you're, as you mentioned before, I think your superintendents are taking photographs at different stages of the project, so you can verify stuff. Everybody
is. It starts with the salesman and goes all the way to the service techs at the end, that's how you clock in on the jobs, take your picture to start, progress pictures throughout the day, progress pictures of your safety setup at the beginning of the day.
Before you
set up. And
anchorages and things and fall protection.
And so then you can turn around and send reports to contractors, to homeowners. I can yell at them from my computer. I can comment and be like, where's your rope on in this picture? So
interesting. Yeah.
You always hope to learn something when you come to these too. And I know we did the large house. We also have industrial work where there's two people out on their own, and we'll have to talk after with some of these because we don't apply any technology to that. So that's a good one.
Well, what do you got in store for 23, man? You're always working on, you're like a mad scientist. You're always working on something.
They always come from other people. I just say that's a good idea to do.
Absolutely.
No, so the big ones this year. So right now we're transitioning to helmets from hard hats. We're far from the first general contractor, but those all came in over the last couple of weeks. So all of our employees will be in those here by the end of the month. So I can go back to 2 or 3 different times through the years where somebody fell.
Back of the head protection.
Yeah, chin strap, whole 9 yards. And we went with a Studson and some Milwaukees, but the technology is really fascinating. The ones we chose have a RFID tag that you can put your emergency contact. So if somebody's having a medical issue, you can scan it with your phone and know everything about them. So moving to that. And then we're requiring it for all subcontractors by the end of the year also. So every new contract that goes out will say, put money in, you will be wearing helmets on our projects by the end of the year. So our employees, not much pushback, 1 year, 1 there. But
subcontractors, that'll be interesting.
It'll be hard for us. I mean, I know because I've seen it and I've talked about other guys, and that was the injury that happened 2 weeks before I started. Was a guy who fell off a ladder and fell back and hit his head on the ground. Traumatic brain injury. His hard hat fell off.
I can't think of many trades that should be wearing one more than roofers.
Yeah,
so
and that's when they're on the roof on a flat roof. There's nothing flying above them. Not much room to wear a hard hat. They go through the roof. We do wall panel installation. A lot of stuff where we do crane flying. But I know it's coming for us trying to get, because I know we can get hard hats for $11 a piece. Helmets are a lot more, but
so we're
interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to that. That's probably the most tactical. We've been using the Make You Safe devices for the last year. So I don't, what I always kind of tell people is, safety kind of moves and fits and starts to me. 10 years ago, if you're doing BBS and JSAs, you were way ahead of the curve. Now, If you compare our safety just being realistic, if you compare ours to other large GCs, we all look pretty similar. We have different names for it, everything, but it's all kind of the same stuff. To me, probably the next big leap is going to be the wearables. And I can't imagine within 5 years that it isn't just common. And so the one that we found, this Make You Safe, there's a lot that look at like one thing, body motion, whatever. The Make You Safe does look at heat stress, falls, trips, exertion, light levels, all kinds of different things in a device that you wear on your arm. So our biggest push with that right now is just figuring out getting people to wear them. So we're working through that right now.
And then just this data. There's so much data generated. Are you able to?
What we're finding is it needs to be on projects where we have a full-time safety manager and somebody that can really monitor that data and do something with it. So that one, we'll stick with that. I do think that just becomes common as time goes on.
I do too. I think that is a direction that we're all going to be moving.
So,
and Make You Safe, obviously, is a sponsor of the program. I love them and I love the technology. And it's interesting because, again, I refer back to the guys that I read. They talk about the necessity to understand work that is done successfully. We all focus on, when we have work that deviates from the expected. Those are the issues that we deal with typically. But until you understand how work is done successfully, it's really difficult to modify that. And so what better way to know how work is done successfully than have data on it?
Yeah, I don't know if we're still the only, but we're the first construction company to be using it. Most of it was more in the general industry, but I'm a big believer in the technology. And my big push now is let's get a few job sites 100%. Everybody wearing them every day, and let's really make use of the data. And as opposed to one here, there, two there. The other one that we're going to be starting with is a company called MindForge. And so one of the big challenges you have on a job is, you tell the foreman something for the subcontractor and you hope that information gets to their people. And, it becomes a telephone game of who knows what they heard.
Right.
And so you're like, I told them, but did you? And so this one we're going to start. We have a school project coming up here in Omaha that we're going to use it on, and then a couple others. And I was very adamant that we're only trying it on jobs without a full-time safety manager.
Okay.
Because one of my challenges or worries is the large jobs with safety staff and everything just keep getting better, and do the smaller jobs without. I don't want that gap to widen. So kind of at the point of, I really don't want us to try any technology that can't be used everywhere. So the MindForge is an app, and it goes on the worker's phone. And when they get up to the trailer, they scan a QR code and then it populates. So like the orientation video, instead of sitting in our trailer and doing it, they watch it on their phone, take the quiz, send it in. And so that's a time saver for our superintendents. But What I'm really excited about is that the superintendent then can send out information to everyone on the job site or just to subsets.
Mhm.
So they could be walking through and see, hey, this is exactly what we want a cut station to look like.
Mhm.
They can take a quick picture and goes to everyone on site.
Mhm.
And emergency communications, but I think there's going to be some really good quality applications with
Wow.
it too.
Love it.
As
I
far
wanna
as
hear more
here's how
about
you,
that. Like,
here's
I
how you
need
install a window.
MindForge.
MindForge.
So you can actually put
MindForge.
instructions.
Yeah, and you can upload training too. So we're looking forward to like
work instructions.
yeah, so like we have silica training, and for whatever
Mhm.
reason, the emphasis on that from a lot of our subs seems to have faded
A little bit.
over the last couple
Yeah,
of years.
well,
So
you
you're
know,
constantly reminding.
OSHA's interest seems to have faded a little bit, perhaps.
You know, we have our silica training. It's 20 minutes, and
Mhm.
we could upload that onto there. And so if you have a
Awesome.
crew struggling, you could just shoot it right to them and say,
Mhm.
stop,
Hey, just a
do
quick
the training,
reminder.
and then it documents that they've completed it in a little quiz and
Mhm.
goes back. So I have high hopes for it. I'm
I
hoping
love
it'll go
that.
well.
MindForge. And
Yeah.
this is the guy that introduced me to QR codes other than Mexican restaurants. And the application that we have, and I was at a location not too long ago. I saw a QR code that directed you to SDSs. I
Mhm.
took a picture of it, sent it out on LinkedIn, and I bet it got 30,000 views. I mean,
Yeah.
people are really embracing this ability to utilize these document management
And
systems.
somebody questioned of how OSHA would apply to it. And we had an OSHA inspection, a complaint-based inspection at our warehouse last year. And for me, I'm a 1926 guy. This was a
Mhm.
1910 inspection. It was a terminated employee who called in, but
Of course.
one of the things was, how do you, he did the usual OSHA inspector question, show me an SDS sheet for this product. So my warehouse manager walked up, scanned the code,
No shit.
it's on my phone.
Good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Good.
I always, in the past, I was always really nervous about anything you asked an individual to put on their personal phone.
Right. Yes,
And,
that comes up.
You know, that comes up, and we haven't had a lot of issues with that. I think what really changed it was COVID, frankly,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because so many of our job sites, you had to do a daily
Mhm.
questionnaire of are you
Right.
healthy? It was all QR code based, and people just got
Mhm.
used to.
So they
Right.
became less resistant to that.
And I think unlimited data plans are a lot more common in the world too. So
Right.
people don't stress about you're using that.
Right.
So yeah,
But that used to be an argument.
It-
Not everyone would be willing to do that.
It
or
helps
carry a
with
phone.
us because we require them to use a phone. So if they don't want to put it on their phone, we give them a work phone. So because we have to make them use company cam.
Mhm.
And the nice thing with our SDS sheets is it's a Google Drive folder. So you don't have to install anything on your phone. It'll open up a web link.
Mhm.
So it's we haven't run into an issue yet. I mean, we've done a couple prison jobs where only one person has a phone. But to me, as long as there is a
Yeah,
phone
man.
there, you have access. Because even if you had an SDS binder on site, it's going to take time to get to
I
it on a
know.
construction
Yeah.
site.
I shouldn't say this, but I would not let a fear that OSHA might not allow or accept or understand these. I wouldn't let that inhibit me from trying these new things, because the industry evolves much faster than the regulatory agency, you know? So
Right.
if it works, embrace it. If your employees are good with it, I mean, we'll figure that other part out.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I always say that, yeah, you got to, if you're controlling the hazard to an acceptable level of risk, then you find out whether or not it meets the OSHA standard. And if
Right.
it doesn't,
yes.
maybe you tweak it a little bit so that it does. But the main thing is just controlling the hazard to an
Mhm.
acceptable
Yeah,
level
but the
of risk.
order, that's the order.
Right.
Identify and control that hazard, and then let's figure out how we can make it compliant if we need to tweak it a little bit. But
Right.
just like your employees, I love the fact that employees are so incredibly adaptive. You will give them a task, give them a work environment. They're going to figure out a way to get the product out. And sometimes what they do is really incredibly insightful and useful. Sometimes it's not. So we might have to pull it back a little bit, but man, they are just really adaptive. And so let's figure it out. And then we'll kind of tweak the compliance side of it, rather than let's just try to be compliant, you know, black and white, and then you just make it work somehow, which is difficult.
Yeah.
What do you got? You got anything new and exciting? Can you
Technology- I
match
can't
any of this
match that.
technology
No, that's why
like
I'm
this?
sitting here with my jaw open going, wow, that's a
Right.
great idea.
I totally, and as will every listener. I mean, or
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
You
So
know,
we're
it's
not really. I thought about when I was coming over here, but it sounds lame now compared to that. Is just Microsoft Teams has. I don't know if you do much with that, but if you have that as a tool on your computer, that there's a lot of features in there that you don't realize.
Like what?
Well, one of the things is we set it up in Teams, and so I have all of my groups set up in Teams, and within that you can do forms as an example with QR codes. So you can set up inspections that are very specific, create a QR code, and post that. And we have them at a couple of our plants. We're rolling this out further and further, but you just go up and am I a director? Yes. You can QR code that, and that's a director's inspection. Oh. And if I'm a manager, you QR code that one, and it's a manager's inspection. For a safety committee, you QR code that one, and it's the
and that is a Teams function.
Yeah, and it's in Teams. You can just set up forms, and so you can tailor it specifically to what you want them to look for. And the thing I like about that is that if suddenly we realize we do want to check the fire extinguishers because they're not, so then I can just add that as one of the little check marks. And once we get to 100% on that, then I can just take it off. That it looks like we're on top of that. So yeah, so that's.
Yeah, we're using the QR codes too, just with our wellness efforts. So we had a larger owner that required us to have a wellness coordinator on the site. So
really?
Full-time wellness on site.
On site.
And
who required this?
One of our owners.
Okay.
Project owner.
Yeah, one of the project owners. We were required to have full-time wellness. And at first we we're like, well,
No energy drink.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
at first we were like, well, this is just old school construction thought. Like, well, this is silly. And and honestly, the first couple people we hired to be the on-site wellness coordinator, it didn't work. And then we hired the right person.
You got the right person.
Unbelievable the difference it made on that project. So
Really?
she had her own little office in the big lunch break area, and would offer. She led Stretch and Flex every morning, and so Stretch and Flex turned into yoga. And so here's 400, 500 people all doing, all these yoga stretches as opposed to
downward dog.
Yeah, as opposed to just touch your toes. And people loved it. And she became a resource for if you wanted your blood pressure checked or whatever else. It was just huge. And so we actually have hired her now to be the wellness manager for the company.
No kidding.
Saying, okay, what you did there, let's try and get that out. And let's.
What is it she did that generated the interest? How did she do that?
So I think part of it is we had everybody. We bring everybody together in the morning to do stretch and flex and safety moment and all those sorts of things. And she's very dynamic in front of everyone.
It is so personality driven.
Walk the job site every day, talking to people. How are you feeling? And people, the word got out that she's a genuine person, and it worked really well. So now trying to replicate that company wide, there's some challenges with that we're working through, but I said, we want stretch and flex to look like this everywhere. And we want, and so the other issue we had to me, like with the wellness side is it's really easy to do, like we're all going to drink water challenges, but that only goes to the people with email. And,
right.
And so that's the other piece of how do you get that same push with your hourly staff. And so we're using QR codes with that up around the job site. And we do Wellness Wednesdays as a toolbox talk, but that information going out directly. And then we also have right now, we've had, mental health is a huge issue in construction. No one ever talks about it, suicide rate and everything else. So we actually have updated our crisis management plan to include mental health reaction. And here's our process. Here's who you call, here's your resources. And she's doing training right now with all the managers in the company of how do you respond to a mental health crisis.
Fantastic.
So it's something a little bit different that I'd have never thought we'd have done. Even
that would be on the horizon. But
but it's
here we are.
Brings great value. So,
oh man. And yeah, I mean, even the idea of employee engagement and getting them truly involved has to go beyond what our typical view of safety into these mental health, wellness.
It's far, and it's far from perfect, and we haven't gotten it everywhere we want to, but making the effort.
I love
something
it.
You said that hit my ear was just that everybody kind of got the feeling that she cared about them, right? That she genuinely gave a damn. And I think that's the hurdle that safety professionals have to overcome. Is I'm not here to beat you up. I'm not here to, criticize. I'm here because I really genuinely care. And then from that place, you can get people's discretionary energy. People will give you, what they're required to plus something. And that's the hurdle.
If they believe that you are sincere.
If they think you're sincere and you're as sincere as you can pretend to be.
Right. And hey man, everybody deserves a beating once in a while, but like my old man used to say, I'm beating you because I love you.
It's going away from the old, like we've talked about before, don't be the safety cop.
Right.
You're not a safety cop. You need to be a resource. You need to be somebody who's there. You don't want them to be afraid when you show up.
Right.
Jump off the roof in the back.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I mean, and that's the thing is for the most part, I have a lot of the crews, like they yell as soon as they see me park, they're yelling like, oh, like isn't excited. Like Alex is here. Not
That's
like,
great.
oh God, everybody put the ropes on,
Yeah.
which still does happen.
That's a-
But it was getting that buy-in from
That's a big evolution,
people
man.
and like getting them. So, hey, Alex, here's what's going on. And like I'm trying to get the early intervention thing versus, and that's
Mhm.
where it really helped out this year. Is we had guys like, hey, my back's bothering me. I have resources for you.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. That's
Versus, hey, I can't get up. My back hurts so bad.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I have that problem. I've been, I messed my back up like a few months ago.
Mhm.
And so I've been going to a PT, Andrew Nelson, for anybody that's interested, but I've been doing that dry needling. You ever have the
Mhm.
dry needling done? He does like the dry needling and cupping where he's like
Mhm.
moving those blood deposits around. And I can't see it because it's my lower back. Maybe he's not doing anything as far as, but it's given me quite a bit of relief. So shout out to my buddy Andrew. And if you have back issues, let me know. I'll get you his contact information.
We had kind of a unique one kind of near the end of our prime roofing season because we used the H-2B visa program. So we get a group of guys up from Mexico from April 1st and the end of November. So one of the visa guys, it was the week before Thanksgiving, hurt his back, couldn't move, was really hurting. Problem was he was going back to Mexico in 10 days. If I push him through the traditional workers' comp process, he won't get seen by somebody he needs to get seen by before he goes home.
Mhm.
So I put him through telehealth first. He was a 53-year-old older Mexican fellow who was kind of like talking to somebody on the phone was completely out of it to him. And so I got him into Athletico, where they do the active release technique. So it's not quite OSHA recordable.
Mhm.
So you can still pay out of pocket. It's legal. And doing that to getting him help, because I knew if I put him through the traditional workers' comp process where I get into a doctor, they say, you're off work for 2 weeks. Here's a specialist. He's not going to see that specialist before he goes home.
Right.
So at first he's like, well, I want to go see a real doctor. I was like, if I take you that way, I'm not going to get you better before you go home. My focus right now is not you missing hours. It's making sure you feel better before you go home.
Mhm.
And it took him a little bit, but once we got him through some treatments and that kind of thing, where he felt better, he was able to work a few more days before we went back, because their big focus is to work as many hours as they can so they can take that money home.
Mhm. Sure.
But you have to approach each situation differently. So
Mhm.
sometimes alternative treatment is a better treatment.
Mhm. And the telehealth is interesting too.
Oh,
It's really
huge
expanded.
for us. Yeah.
Yep, I see it a lot of places now, which I think is fantastic.
That's actually another question that's come up. You guys know, I don't know how many of you use Dr. Wampler, but he passed away, and that's just a
Mhm.
huge vacuum.
Yeah, that's too
in the
bad. That was
total
really
understanding
unfortunate. Yeah.
of occupational medicine. That finding someone that doesn't just say, how many days you want off? 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And being able
Yeah.
to work collaboratively with someone that
Mhm.
understands industry and understands getting people back to work.
Well, it was funny. My wife, she's a parent educator in Lincoln Public Schools, and she had her back injured by a student. A student came after her, this special needs disabled student, was having an episode, was running around with a big plastic tote. So he went to hit my wife with it. And so she turned really quick. And right as she turned, he hit her right in the center of the back. And so, yeah, it strained her back pretty good, but she was going through the workers' comp process as an injured person. And there was no resource for her. Like they just sent her, here's all the forms you fill out. Here's where you go. And it's like, what do I do?
Yeah,
Like,
navigate
there
this.
was that. And so I was able to walk her through that. And I'm sitting there thinking I was only able to do that because that's my job at White
Mhm.
Castle is I am a resource to everybody, to both as a workers' comp coordinator to safety person. If she didn't have that, she would have been so struggling in such a bad spot where here's what you need to ask them so that you can get back to work and get the treatment you need.
Mhm.
And that's what I think some companies struggle with and organizations struggle with is there's people. These are people. They're not you can't just throw everything at them here, figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm fortunate to have a very good claims coordinator that is much better at
In tune with
communicating
that.
yes, than I am.
Because that's a great point,
not a
man.
strength.
And we've talked about situations where we have an injured employee who does need some care and assistance, and we just abandon them. We just leave them to navigate that system themselves, and it's incredibly challenging. And I think as employers, as human beings caring about our employees, helping them navigate that. I had Ron DeBoard on a long time ago, 3 years ago, talking about bringing his employees groceries because they couldn't get out of the house, or checking in on them, physically checking
Mhm.
them. This is the HR director periodically just to see if they needed anything, helping them with all of this hospital nightmare that is so challenging sometimes. And I think we forget that.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
We have
That's
a
really-
lady that
it's
does it
difficult.
for us. That just, she nails it, you know, and she's on top of it.
Yeah.
And but she does it so well that nobody realizes how
Mhm.
critical what she does is, you know,
Right.
and
It is a
so
critical
when she's about
piece.
to retire, I told her she can't until I do. So.
That's right.
Because I know
it's
that's
all going to
gonna
go to hell when you're gone.
that's-
And they're going to realize that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I just went through that. Our claims coordinator, 15 years. I lived in fear of her retirement.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't ever. And then she did.
Did she?
Yeah, she did. And we got incredibly fortunate. We found someone internally that
Oh,
has
good.
taken that role and just run with it.
Oh,
Right.
good.
Done a fantastic job.
But
yeah,
it's a
that
certain
kept me up
person that
nights
does it.
for
That's,
a
I
very
can't
long
imagine.
time. I feel fortunate. So.
Well, we're running up on time. Somehow I'm going to have to compile this information, the things that you guys were mentioning, put it together so people can access it. If you are, I shouldn't volunteer this, but if you have questions about anything the guys mentioned today, let me know. You can email me and I will contact them rather than barrage them with requests. But maybe I can even send out the names of these different apps and utilities that you guys are involved in. Really fascinating stuff. The last thing I want to ask before we adjourn is, where do you get your information? What do you have a resource? Like, do you read something? Do you listen to something? How do you find these new ideas?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Honestly, that's where I learned about Ortho Live as a telehealth provider and other people. And it's a resource. I've had Josh Lose,
Mm-hmm.
who
Just talked to him yesterday.
he a couple jobs, he's been doing safety for them. He's like, hey, he messaged me, hey, Alex, your guys aren't doing this.
Mhm.
And so it puts eyes on my job sites
Mhm.
that they don't realize. So it's an incredible resource. And now he calls me. But
Good.
that's one of those things. I've learned a ton on LinkedIn, and just I periodically check it a couple times a day and see, like, if you get into those safety groups or our Midwest
Mhm.
Safety Cooperative, and seeing just the information from your network.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's so much
Mhm.
that we forget to tap into it sometimes. But we had done a program like that with the construction industry back when I was with OSHA, back in the old David Soul days when he was with Kiewit. We had a group of construction safety people who agreed that if I drive by your job site and I see your guys doing unsafely, I'll just notify you.
Yep.
It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't aggressive. It was just a courtesy, you know, to try to, at least within the Omaha city limits, try to keep a handle on some of these things. This was 15 or 20 years ago, but you know, I think we all appreciate that if it's delivered with the right intentions. You know, even if it's not, sometimes I guess we want to know about it. But
I was with Fallowich. We had a little thing. We called it Brothers Keepers, and we were just a bunch of subcontractors got together, roofers and all kinds of
Mhm.
us got together and made that agreement. We met about once a month for breakfast, and we'd see each other. I
Mhm.
called one of the roofing contractors that was on there and said, "Hey, your guys are up there?" And he was, "Stay right there. Tell me what they do." And he called them up on the phone, and I could see the supervisor up there without fall protection. He pulls his phone out and then he starts looking around.
Yeah.
The rat freak out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
We tried to do something similar with like serious safety violations among GCs
Mhm.
12, 15 years ago.
Mhm.
You know, if I remove a roofer for a fall protection violation that they just can't hop over the other GC's job, that, you know, that
Mhm.
removal would be global.
Right. Was that
Around
through
the
AGC
city.
or something,
I
perhaps,
can't-
or was it?
Because
I kinda remember that with
and
AGC.
it just didn't. There's just too many variables.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
you know, it just didn't work out. But you know, we're fortunate. We have, obviously, we go to the AGC and the ASSE. You go to the different conventions and you hear kind of what's going on
Mhm.
and the newest things coming up, and LinkedIn. We've been fortunate. To me, the more you can network with other people that do what you do. So I know our one insurance broker sets up a roundtable every year with about 20 larger GCs, and
Nice.
and, you know, spend a couple days talking through what's next, what's working for you, what isn't. Get a lot of value from that,
Yeah. I think
And-
the networking thing is
Yeah.
really critical.
and then just empowering your people. And I think when they see that when they have ideas and you will run with them and do something with it, that encourages more.
Most definitely. Awesome. Guys, this has been fantastic. I think we're going to have to do it again. There's so much information here. I'm going to actually have to go. I never listened to the episodes, but I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this and compile all this information, because some of the things that you mentioned were, I think the utility of those things is just transcends all businesses, industries, applications, great stuff. Thank you very much. It's great to see you all. Have a good weekend. Guys, keep doing what you're doing. Take this information, run with it. I don't think there's any shame in stealing information. That's how we all.
I was going to throw something out there.
Yeah,
I
please.
brought a form, just this non-routine task form that we set up at Airlight. The maintenance guys didn't like it. It hasn't worked. It's crap, but it's a form, and I think it has some real merit. And it was just one of those things I didn't push it that hard. We don't have a lot of non-routine tasks, but I brought that with me just to.
But if somebody's looking for
a form,
by all means,
whatever, I'll have that.
I think that may be the starting point for everyone who even can, if you haven't considered that in the past, at least formalizing your thought process is probably useful until that becomes routine, and then we can find something else. So, if you need any information, contact me, Doug@FletcherSafety.com. I will reach out to these guys. I'll ask them if you can contact them directly and see if that's okay with them. Otherwise, this information is for everyone. Have a great weekend, everybody. Cam, thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.